Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to be wrapping up our April trait of success. We've been looking at how to love others and learn to do that effectively in our lives. In week 1, we looked at how our past experiences tend to hinder us from being able to do that. Week 2, we looked at the foundation that has to be established in our lives in order to love others the way God calls us to love others, which is unconditionally. And then last week we looked at what real love is, and we kind of defined what that looks like and how to apply it to the wide variety of different people that we have in our lives. Today we're going to wrap up this topic by looking at the life-changing power that's actually found within displaying real love to the world around us. Now there's a lot of different things in this world that you can accomplish. For instance, you can have friends, you can graduate high school, you can acquire degrees, you can build a successful business, you can have a successful career in some other business, you can buy a home, you can travel, you can make great family memories. These are all great things that you can accomplish in this life. But at the same time, depending on the circumstances that were out of your control, or possibly by poor decisions that you made, or possibly by just missed opportunities that you didn't take, it's very possible maybe you don't have a lot of friends, maybe you don't have a great education, maybe you will never have a job that you really like and that you can find real success in. Maybe you might never own a home and you just kind of make it by financially the rest of your days here on this earth. You might never get to travel much and your family might be a mess. All right? That's very positive, isn't it? But here's the wonderful thing about today's message. It makes no difference which camp your life falls into this morning. You can still experience the most rewarding experience in this life. We all have an equal ability to experience it no matter what our past successes or our past failures are. It's an equal opportunity that we have been given by God. And that opportunity is this. It's the ability to display real love to the world around us and to the people around us and watch God use us to change the course of a person's life for eternity. It doesn't matter your successes, your failures, where you fall in that mix of all those things that you could accomplish. You have the same opportunity I do and that everybody else in here does to experience the greatest success in life. Today what I'm going to do, we have the kids in here, so I'm just going to tell more stories and stuff like that to hopefully keep them engaged a little bit on our 5th Sunday. But we're just going to walk through Jesus' examples, 4 of them, of him showing love, and I would say this way, perfect love, because he could do it perfectly. Perfect love in 4 different scenarios and see the different results he gets. He's going to show us examples of what we get to do, this opportunity we have been given, which is show the love of Christ to the world around us. So the first story is this. It's a man named Zacchaeus. If you look in your Bibles at some point, you can look in Luke chapter 19. That's where you'll find the account of this man Zacchaeus. Let me give you a little background on who Zacchaeus is. He is the chief tax collector of a region for Rome in the Israeli region. So what that means is this, a couple things we know about him. He is filthy rich. Because he is a chief tax collector. The way he got rich, most of you know this, the way he got rich is by stealing your money. So Rome might say you get 4% from all the people, and the way you make your income is you take whatever else you want. So he might come to you and say, you owe me 9%. You give him 9%, he gives 4% to Rome, and he pockets 5%. At the same time, he's a traitor because they usually use Jews or people from the territories they conquered to be the tax collectors. So he is one of you that then sided with the enemy, with Rome, and then started taking more of your money, and now he's living filthy rich off of your money because he's stealing it from you. Do you like the guy? No, okay? So it'd be like this. Let's say China invades us, takes us over, and China puts a 5% tax on all of us, and then they choose Bill Lawther to be the tax collector. And Bill goes around, and we all know the tax he has to pay is 5% to Rome for all of us, and he starts taking 10% from us. And he's working with the Chinese and taking 10% from us. What do we want to do to Bill right now? Yeah, exactly. That's what we want to do to Bill. He's not really one, so don't hate him forever. This is just an illustration. All right, so we know that about him. The other thing we know about Zacchaeus, he's a short guy. So in stature, whatever reason, he's a short guy, so that just adds to kind of his looks. Maybe that's why he sided with the Romans, is maybe he was picked on and everyone kind of made him an outcast anyways because he is short. Whatever it is, he's working with the Romans, he's short. Everybody in town, everybody in this region hates his guts, but he's filthy rich. And what happens is Jesus has an encounter with him. And the first thing we see, Jesus shows him compassion, because as we talked last week, what true love is, it's not showing just compassion, it's not just sharing truth, it's having a perfect blend between compassion and truth. And that's where you get the love that Christ calls us to show the world around us. So Jesus, the first thing we do, he shows compassion to this man's name, Zacchaeus. The way he does that, Jesus comes into a town. He's already kind of famous, so there's crowds gathering whenever he walks where he goes. He comes into this town. Zacchaeus can't see him. Zacchaeus climbs up a tree because he wants to get a view of this guy named Jesus. As Jesus walks through this huge crowd, he sees this guy in a tree, Zacchaeus, and he says, "Hey, Zacchaeus, come on down. I'm going to go eat with you. Would you have dinner with me today?" And Zacchaeus is like, "Absolutely." The crowd at this point goes, "Why is he eating with him? He should be eating with us," and he's choosing that guy, and that's where he's going to eat with. So he shows him compassion. He gives this guy purpose. He gives him meaning, and he goes, "Let me go eat lunch with you." When he goes and eats with him, he shares truth with him. So now we have the compassion and the truth. Shares truth with him, and then we see the result. Here's the result in Luke 19, verse 8. It says this: "Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, 'I will give half of my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people of their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much.'" So the result we see from Jesus' encounter with this guy is this guy has a life change. This guy goes from stealing money from everyone to being filthy rich and stealing from you so he can be rich, to going, "I will give all my money to the poor." And he says, if I've stolen it from anyone, he knows he stole it from everyone, I'll give him back 4 times. So he's basically going, I'll give all my wealth away because I don't care, because I found the kingdom of God. And so you have a dramatic life change in this man named Zacchaeus. The second example, we know her in the Bible. Typically, she's referred to as a woman at the well. You find her story in John chapter 4. What you have with the woman at the well, some things we know about her. Number one, she's a Samaritan, which means for the Samaritans, they were a lower class of people in the eyes of the Jews. So it was kind of like the racist thing, and they looked at her as a half-breed. She wasn't fully Jew, so her family had somehow stepped outside of Jewish traditions. So they were a failure as a family. She was a half-breed. She's a Samaritan. So she's a lower-class person. The way they looked at them was like dogs. Is you give them scraps and all, but they're kind of just like the dogs. They're human dogs. So she was a Samaritan. The other thing we know about her, outside being a Samaritan, she's been married 5 times. So she's already gone through 5 husbands, been divorced. Usually someone that's been married 5 times. I don't think any of you have. If you have, I'm giving at least a generalization here and a stereotype. If you've been married 5 times, there's probably a good reason why you've been married 5 times. Okay? So she doesn't seem to keep husbands real long. So she's had several divorces. At this point, she's living with a guy. So she's not actually married to this guy, but she's living with a guy. In our culture, that's not so shocking. In that culture, that's like, woo-hoo-hoo. Okay, that doesn't happen. So these are things we know about this lady. She's got a lot of things going against her. We also know she is an outcast in the town she's in. The reason we know that, she's going to come to the well, and she's going to come at noontime, which is one of the hotter times of the day. The ladies who were in good in the city, they would come in the cool mornings and come get their water for the day from the well. The people who weren't to be associated with, those were the people that would come later in the day when no one was around and when it was hotter, and they would come get their water. So she's coming at noontime, so we know she's an outcast in the town. Jesus knows all this stuff about her already when she shows up, and we see the first thing Jesus does is he shows her compassion. And what he does is he says that he has a conversation with her, and then he actually asks her for some water so he can have a drink. Now, a couple of things why this is huge. Number one, Jews didn't talk to Samaritans. So she's kind of taken aback when Jesus talks to her and goes, "I'm a Samaritan, you're a Jew, why are you talking to me?" And then, on top of that, Jesus asked for water, stuff she's touched, and that he's actually going to take from her and drink. And that was like a big no-no, like it's contaminated by a Samaritan. You don't take that from her. So he does both of these things that makes her kind of take back, and she's taken back going, "Why are you treating me this way?" And the next thing we see is after he shows her compassion, he shares a lot of truth with her. And he goes through some truth. And so you see again Jesus sharing compassion and truth with her. And we see the result in John chapter 4, verses 28 through 30. It says this: "The woman left the water jar beside the well and ran back to the village, telling everyone, 'Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. He could possibly be the Messiah.' So the people came streaming from the village to see him." So this woman who's an outcast, Jesus has an encounter with her, shows her love, and from there she goes back into the town and draws the town out to come see Jesus, to be taught by Jesus, okay? We see a dramatic life change from this lady's encounter with Jesus. Now, the third example, this guy's always known as a rich young ruler or the rich man. You find his account in Matthew chapter 19. Here's what we know about this guy. He has an encounter with Jesus. We know he's rich, so he's a wealthy guy. He's actually a very moral guy, so really good guy, doesn't do a whole lot of wrong, a good moral guy. But his biggest issue in his life is he's got a void of purpose in his life. He doesn't really know what the purpose of life is. He knows something's missing. So he has money, he makes good decisions, but something's just not right in his life. So he encounters Jesus, and the first thing we see again is Jesus shows him compassion by taking this guy's question and taking some time to talk to him as this guy kind of shares what he's struggling with. Jesus has some dialogue and shows him compassion. Through that conversation, he shares truth with him. And so you see Jesus again showing compassion and truth and mixing them together perfectly with this guy. And then we see the result in Matthew 19, verse 22. It says this, "But when the young man heard this, he went away sad, for he had many possessions." Now this one's not so great. The first two, you have dramatic life change. This one, the guy leaves the same guy he was when he came. And it says he just walks away sad because he had a lot of possessions. He didn't want to do what Jesus told him he needed to do to find purpose in his life, so he kind of just walks away. So this one doesn't seem to be so successful. Let me give you the fourth example. This one is, I have no real title for it. It's Followers of Jesus in the Desert. In John chapter 6, there's a huge crowd. We estimate anywhere from probably 12 to 15,000 people are following Jesus at this point. The more famous part of the story you recognize was 2 days prior to what I'm going to share with you. 2 days before that, so I'm in this day, not this day, but the day before, you had the feeding of the 5,000. And that's where these 12 to 15,000 people are there. They have no food, and Jesus takes a little boy with the fish and the loaves, and he multiplies them, and he feeds this massive crowd, and then they have 12 baskets left over. So everybody know that story? You get taught that one in Bible school when you're young, okay? So you have that story. That happens 2 days prior. The night before I'm going to share what I share with you is the night Jesus walks on water. So that night is the night before the morning that we get into. That night's when he goes out to the disciples and he walks on water. These are like huge events. They all happen in a very short period of time. And then what happens is this. These people are still with Jesus, and Jesus starts to share truth with them. The first way he showed compassion, for the last 2 days, he's been healing their sick and he's been teaching them. So he's been taking time to care for their needs, get to know them, healing their illnesses and all that. And now he shares truth with them. And then we see the results. So we have his compassion and truth again. In John 6:66, here's what it says. At that point, many of his disciples turned away and deserted him. So at this point, after his compassion and his teaching, 12 to 15,000 people around, most of them just leave. And they walk away. And it's such a drastic number of people. Jesus actually gathers his 12 disciples up right after this and says, "So are you guys ditching me too?" That's literally like, are you going too? Are you leaving me? And that's where his 12 disciples look at him and go, "We have nowhere else to go. We have nowhere else to go. You're our guy. We have no place else to go, so we're sticking with you." But everyone deserts him. And you look at that and go, that wasn't so successful. He showed compassion. He showed love. He did the right combination. He did it perfectly. It wasn't real successful. The point is this. Even Jesus wasn't always successful at changing people's lives for eternity, even though he could perfectly display a real love to him on a daily basis. Even he wasn't successful. Yet that did not stop him from displaying compassion and sharing truth with those that he came in contact with on a daily basis. That did not get him down because he had failures. Also, at the same time, he had successes. He didn't just give up. He makes this truth clear to us in a parable. In Matthew chapter 13, he tells the story of a farmer who scatters seed. And he talks about basically scattering seed. And what he's talking about is us sharing the compassion and the truth of God with the people around us. This is what the illustration is. He goes through the first part where he tells the story. Then later on in verses 18 through 23, he kind of gives an explanation of what that parable, what that story was about. I want to read that to you for a second, because he warns us, you're not always going to have success. You're not going to change everybody's lives for eternity. You're not always going to have great results with the people you share the love of Christ with, or the people you display Christ's love to. It's not always going to work out well. Here's what he says. He says, now listen to the explanation of the parable about the farmer planting seeds. The seed that fell on the footpath represents those who hear the message about the kingdom and don't understand it. Then the evil one comes, snatches away the seed that is planted in their hearts. So the first success, no good. The first try, no good. The second one, it says, the seed that fell on the rocky soil represents those who hear the message and immediately receive it with joy. But since they don't have deep roots that don't last long, they fall away as soon as they have problems or are persecuted for believing God's word. So again, failure. 2. The third one, the seed that fell among the thorns represents those who hear God's word, but all too quickly the message is crowded out by the worries of this life and the lure of wealth, so no fruit is produced. 3 failures. So we're 3 for 3 on failures. And then he says this, the seed that fell on the good soil represents those who truly hear and understand God's word and produce a harvest 30, 60, or even 100 times as much than it had been planted. All right? So he gives a scenario about a farmer who spreads a seed, who basically displays God's love to the world around him, and 3 out of 4 of the seeds produce nothing. 3 of the 4 we would look at and go, that was failure. It didn't result in what we hoped it would result in, but one of them did. And that one results in a yield of 30, 60, or even 100 times as much as had been planted. So he goes, but that one changed a whole bunch of other people's lives. That one out of the 4, that one worked. This morning, what I want to encourage you to be is this. Be a farmer. Display true love to the world around you. And from time to time, one of those seeds that you plant, it will grow. Then you will experience the most rewarding accomplishment that you can experience in this life. You will see God use your life to change the course of someone else's life for all of eternity. Let me give you some examples of this in our real lives today. Jim Scott is seeing this right now. So Jim's right over there. He told me the story after last week's message where we talked about different types of people and how to show compassion and truth to them, that we can't treat everyone the same, and we have to meet them at their level and show them compassion and truth. That's how Christ did it. Jim shared with me afterwards. He goes, every Sunday morning now he goes and gets donuts for his Sunday school class. And when he's there, he started giving them, you said, your notes for your class, right? The lady that checks you out or whatever. So the lady that gets his donuts for him, he started just giving her the notes to his class. Well, last week, when he gets his donuts and gets ready to go, she handed him $3 and said, hey, would you just put this in the offering plate at your church? And she gave him $3 to kind of give offering here at church. Never been here before. She doesn't know anybody in this church except Jim and Paula. And Paula, do you even go inside or do you sit in the car? So it's just Jim. Paula doesn't even love the lady enough to go in there and see her. All she knows is Jim. That's all she knows. But yet now she has some type of connection to our church and to God's people and goes, hey, I want to contribute $3 here just because he's tried to show her compassion and share some truth with her. And slowly and hopefully it makes some type of impact in her life, okay? We're seeing that. Last week, Ann and Greg Hurst, they saw this. They got to baptize their daughter who they've shared the love of Christ with for, how old is she now, 8? For the last 8 years. And then after 8 years of that, she finally decided last week she wanted to give her life to Christ and devote her life to the ministry and to the kingdom of God. And Ann got to actually baptize her kid. We went down and got to see her baptize her and sharing that celebration. So they got to see that where the love of Christ changes the hearts of someone for eternity. I'm hoping to see it. Now on Facebook this week, I shared a post on Wednesday night where I just basically said, I forget what I said, something like, I don't know, this job never gets old, or you never know what we're going to walk into with me and Steven and stuff like that. So now everyone wants to know what happened Wednesday night. So in a very brief way, I will share with you what happened on Wednesday night. So we were here Wednesday night, and I had a meeting after everybody left. So I had scheduled a meeting I knew I had to have happen. And in that meeting were 2 meth addicts that I kind of knew were going to be there, and I knew it could be a little rough. So they came and they were thinking they were going to get into a place to live back with someone where they had previously been kicked out, and they thought they would be okay with having a minister kind of be the third party, and they thought that I would be like kind of helping them get back into this house so they could live in the house. And as soon as I saw them, Stephen was going to go with Christian because they usually go get ice cream or something after Wednesday nights. So I just told Steven, hey, you need to be back here kind of soon because I just have a bad feeling about this. This could get a little rough one way or the other. And I saw them before they went in the office. And I was like, I could tell one of them was high on meth at the time. The other one I found out through the meeting was sober at the time and wasn't on anything. So she was actually pretty clear-minded. But in the meeting, we get into the meeting. Within 30 seconds, my comment basically was, don't you ever let them back in your house. If they come on your property, I would call the cops. I would never let them back. There's no way, because they were so hostile to this other person that I was like, there's no way. Why would you ever let them back in the house? So once they didn't get the answer they were looking for, it kind of turned into a messy situation. So I got called a lot of things, and it's funny, I get called that a lot anymore around here. I'm just saying, not from you people, just from dealing with the people we deal with. So I got called a lot of names, a lot of situations, stuff like that. Started to get he got very intense. Let's just say I kept my hand back here where I had my protection and kind of kept the other hand on my chair. Eventually, he got up and left out of the room in a huff after screaming and all that and went out into the hallway. I met with the other parties in the room the two left. I met with the one party and said, hey, we're going to get you out of here safely, so we're going to have to go take care of this before you can get out of the office, because they actually drove over with her. But at the time, they had incentive to not do anything because they thought they were going to get a good result. At this point, they had no incentive. So I said, hey, you know what, you stay in here. We're going to go take care of this. When we finish all this, we'll escort you to your car. You can get in your car. You can leave. We'll make sure you're safe. So from there, I went out with Stephen, and we went out into the main hallway out here by the front doors of the office area. We got out there. The girl was still inside. The guy had locked himself out somehow. So I got to talk to the girl, and as I was talking to her, the guy came up to the door, and he kept screaming at me, and he got up in the door and was screaming stuff at me, and I won't say what it is because we're in church. So he was screaming. I was just a foot inside the door with the girl, and Stephen was 3 feet over here. So at some point I had to stop him. I just said, hey, see this guy over here, Stephen? It's my youth guy. He's a professional fighter, and if I let him out the door, this is going to end real bad for you, and he's going to kill you. And so it's best that you back off. I know, hey, the greatest thing I ever did is hire an MMA boxer to do our teen ministries here who loves the Lord. So I made it very clear to him, this is not going to be good if that guy comes over. So then he tried to do a stare down of Stephen through the glass, which I had to remind him again, this is not going to end well. It's best you back off right now because this isn't going to be good for you. So he did finally back off. Now, this is where it gets into the whole love thing. So we talked to this young lady, 22 years old. I talked to her for probably 20 minutes, and Stephen chimed in some because Stephen has some background in this with his family. So we talked to her for that time and just kind of reassured her, we'll get you help if you want. We'll take you somewhere right now. We'll get you into rehab. You've got to get someplace you can detox. You can't get your life back get your life straight again until you get the drugs out of your system and all that. And we talked to her and just kind of reassuring her that there's people that love her. And so at the end of the conversation, basically, before we let her go, because at the end of it, she understood everything. She understood the situation she's in, but she still won't leave the guy. So she was deciding she was going to walk the streets with him that night, that she was going to go off. And it's heartbreaking because you sit there and go, man, such potential there, and these drugs have just taken her to the point she just can't get away from it from the guy. So before she left, one of the things I did is I asked her, one, can I pray with you? She's like, yeah, you can pray with me. So I prayed with her. And then before she left, right after that, I just said, hey, I just want you to know, if you've never heard this in your life before, because she told us her family background and stuff, and I said, if you've never heard this before, I want you to hear it today. I just said, hey, I want you to know I love you, and that there are people that love you. And I just want you to know that if you never hear that, there are people that love you, there are people that will help you. You can always find me and Stephen. We're back here at the church. Come see us. We will take you anywhere you need to go to get help. Just want you to know you're loved. And I went over to give her a hug, and she gave me a hug, and Stephen, dude, she hugged me hard, okay? It is one of those hugs where you're like, okay, no one hugs this lady. And it was one of those things that you go, okay, she went out. From that time, 2 seconds later, after wiping some tears off her face, she walks out the door, and she walks off with a guy on meth, and they start walking down the street, okay? And then we go, and we get the lady. Well, actually, we had to go get stuff out of the car with them there, so Stephen went with me. It's nice having Stephen, because I don't even have to worry about it anymore, because I'm being like, if someone has to get in a fight now, it's not even having to be me anymore. I just say, Stephen, you do it. And then Stephen's like, oh, I'll fight. So we go get the stuff out of the car. We give it to them. They take off. And then you see them just walk off. And it breaks your heart. But the only thing you can think of is this. I planted a seed. Okay? If nothing else in that evening, with all the crazy chaos and everything else that happened, she heard someone say, you are loved. There's a God who loves you. It doesn't matter what your past is. It doesn't matter what you've done. There's a God who's always there for you, that's willing to take you back at any time. She got to hear that, and you hope beyond hope that somehow you planted a seed that somehow works out. My call to you this morning, church, is this. Be a farmer who plants a seed of love in the people that you have contact with on a daily basis. And then you pray that God somehow makes 1 in 4 of those be that seed that starts to grow. And then they start to have an impact on the kingdom, and they start to learn the love of God that we know, and that they can have their lives change as we see in the scriptures and we see all the time in our world. Be a farmer who plants seed wherever you go and shares the love of Jesus Christ through your compassion and through your truth so that you can change the lives of people for eternity. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father,